You want it, you got it. Let's talk about it. WNBA fans talk. Speaking about Stephanie White, and we're talking about a couple elite point guards. That's right. You're talking about Kelsey Mitchell, no doubt about it. And you talk about Caitlin Clark. So let's get into it. I want to give everybody an opportunity because this situation here really is a interesting one because you got Stephanie White, who is actually good coach, Indiana fan favorite, no doubt about it. And let's get into it because this was interesting to me. And we had one that started off, okay, that's from the Raiders. That's talking about John Gruden and Bill Belichick's done, but we're going to skip that. So we got Paul. Paul, what's going on, man? Beaver would still have a losing record without Caitlin. You're 100% correct. Mitchell is better because she has someone getting her the ball. You're 100% correct there, right? Because at the end of the day, they have created a tandem, right? So it's an interchangeable point guard situation. And that is something that was successful for the Indiana Fever, right? So that's perfect. All right, let's go to Karen Carlisle. What do you got, Karen? This guy is basically a Clark hater. Ooh, that's a strong statement right there. This was Mitchell's best year. Let her go somewhere else. Fever will have a replacement, right? So, Karen, I gotta respect that as your opinion, and I appreciate your opinion. But at the end of the day, I'm not a Caitlin Clark hater. I get more flack for reporting on Caitlin Clark than you may or anyone else may believe, right? Because at the end of the day, uh, I have to go through. There's more players than Caitlin Clark. Now, why did I start covering Caitlin Clark, or how did this all start? I always take the underdog, right? Who's the underdog out there? Deion Sanders. I'll talk about Deion Sanders, right? He's an underdog. Caitlin Clark. Everybody's going against him. Everybody's going one way. I got to go the other way, all right? And in reality of it, I'm a Caitlin Clark fan, okay? And I'm a point guard fan, first of all. So when it comes to point guards, and you guys can always challenge anything I say, and I appreciate your comments. But at the end of the day, I have to be a Caitlin Clark fan, right? Because I like Caitlin Clark. I like what she does on the court. I'm an Indiana Fever fan because I like the players of the Indiana Fever, right? Because they got to go out there and they got to go us against the world, right? And that's where this whole premise started. But now the Indiana Fever have reached up to another level, right? We've changed coaches, but at the end of the day, you got two elite point guards, and that was my point. You got two elite point guards, and when you have that, you have to really get that defined and understand how we're going to make this work. But at the end of the day, Karen, I don't have a problem with what you said. You got a right to your opinion. All right, let's go, Stephen North. What's going on? Kelsey is a great player and should be maxed out. Okay, that's good. That's good. I like that. CC is the player was constantly double team blitz, leaving Mitchell open for wide open shots and layups. Mitchell had her best year statistically last season with CC. Where else can Kelsey play? Okay, we're moving out. We're saying okay, the Indiana's the only place. Where else can Kelsey play where she will have these many open shots and layup? However, Mitchell can be replaced with a bigger, stronger, younger player who could shoot in free agency theoretically. All right. So, Steven, that's a great comment, and I got to respect it, right? I don't. Now, when I say I got to respect it, okay, at the end of the day, also understand it doesn't mean I agree with it. It just means that, hey, you're entitled to your opinion. And this is where I'm going with this whole story, right? Because I kind of look at Mitchell and I look at it from a different lens, right? Mitchell is not just an ordinary player. See, a lot of times people what they don't really see are the intangibles, right? The intangibles. What are the intangibles when you're scouting a player or looking at a player? These things don't come up in the box score. So when you start running through analytics and shots and all that, no. Hold on a minute, right? So the Indiana Fever did something that really no other organization in the WNBA has done. What was that the Indiana Fever did? They gave the keys to the car to Caden Clark and said, play how you play, right? Nobody else comes in the league and does that, right? Nobody's going to come in there and they're going to say it. I mean, you got to understand, right? You got Trey plays with the Atlanta Hawks, right? I mean, he plays in Oklahoma. They give him the keys to the car. No other coach is going to do that to allow a player to have that much talent, right? But Caitlin Clark, I love Caitlin Clark because here's what the WNBA doesn't know. They don't know the true ability of Caitlin Clark. And part of it's got to draw it out. You got to have the right players, right? So when it comes to Mitchell, there were points in the season. Okay, in my eyes, I'm not an analytic. I'm not gonna run analytics and get in the shooting. I'm gonna go with the real eye test. And when people say, "Money, Mike, you didn't watch the Fever," I watched every single game. I can go back and tell you plays that things happened you probably didn't even notice, right? But at the end of the day, okay, when you look at this, right, there were moments that Caitlin really struggled. I mean, in the games, right, she struggled. I mean, she was off, couldn't score, couldn't do. And you know what Mitchell did? Mitchell stepped in, right? Now, Mitchell was not doing that before because the Indiana Fever were not requiring that from Mitchell. Now, you get another coach in there, okay, or you get another player. Trust me, Caitlin, I'll tell you why you're MVP. And I can really tell you, Caitlin Clark's the MVP of the WNBA. So when people say you don't like Caitlin, how can I not like Caitlin when I'm telling you Caitlin is the MVP and the MVP of the WNBA. Now, don't get me wrong, Asia Wilson is a great player. Great player. Strength and conditioning, that's the thing with Don. See this thing with Don, I'm figuring out Don, right? Because I've covered Don, and I know how to beat Don, right? Transitional defense, only way you can beat Don, but you got to be in great strength and conditioning, right? So all of Don's players, okay, even Boston, right? The Indiana Fever are really taking it easy on Boston right now, right? Because Boston should be in better shape, right? Because Boston played for Don State, and Don wasn't having it because Don gets up in the morning, 5 a.m., doing the same workout she did in college, same workout she did in the WNBA, and now she's doing the same workout with her players. So what does that give her players? An advantage, strength, and conditioning. Nobody's going to work you to death like Don. So you got to look at that and say, now you got Caitlin Mitchell. Mitchell's been here 8 years. All right. So let's not just put and say Caitlin made Mitchell better. Mitchell made Caitlin better. Right. So you got two elite franchise point guards, right? And you have to interchange them. This is where Stephanie White, right? Because you guys, everybody's thinking it's Stephanie White, Stephanie White, Stephanie White, right? So I'm sitting here and I'm going Stephanie White, right? Okay, so either Stephanie White walks on water because she doesn't, but you have to put it in perspective. Stephanie White is a big time coach in Indiana. She's not a big time coach in the United States of America, right? She doesn't have that pedigree to step into this role. And she's doing something here that's really, really, really going to be difficult, right? Because you got Stephanie White. I told you I go over the track record. I only speak on what coaches or players say or do, right? So when I talk about Kelsey Mitchell halfway through in the season last year, she was like, good luck to the Indiana Fever. We all heard that. I didn't make that up, right? And with Stephanie White, here's the deal. I didn't make anything up about Stephanie White. Stephanie White is coming into the Indiana Fever, okay, as an Indiana fan favorite. It's a blueprint. Now, do I salute the Indiana Fever? Yes. I salute the organization. I salute the Simon family and this blueprint. This is what I'm telling you about a blueprint. You want to when you listen to me, listen to my introduction. It'll talk about how do I make you more money. I don't, and I'm not talking about going out there and buying and selling. I'm talking about business models, corporate business models that turn around and you make extreme scalability in revenue executing flawlessly, right? So this thing that Indiana created is a blueprint that Cathy Englebert should adapt, right? And what do I mean by adapt this blueprint? You've got the Indiana Fever have a head coach that was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Indiana. That's a fan favorite. I talk about high-profile coaches, right? So here you got this player who played in the WNBA, is playing here, coaching in the WNBA. She's from the same place of Caitlin Clark, right? So what did Indiana do? They got the first-round pick, okay? And what was Caitlin able to do? Play at home. What do I always tell and recommend to all parents, any girls that get scholarships, you tell them, keep them as close to home as you can. They play better, right? Going across the country is not good for any player, and that's just the fact of life, right? So now, why don't the WNBA adopt this model? Okay, because you're really the ABA, you're not the NBA. You're really formulating the league, but the home team players should be able to play at home. That should be first right of refusal. So if you took Paige Buchers should be going to Connecticut, right? Connecticut should get that, and then they got a right of refusal if they don't want it, right? They can say, no, we don't want the player. So at the end of the day, you can put the player back in the draft, right? So Juju Watkins, right? If you had an expansion or Steve Ballmer should get Juju Watkins, right? Because that player's from LA. Why are we going to take the player out of LA and send him somewhere else? But here nor there, but let's get back to it because this one here, I'm going to get really, really good and interesting with you, right? So you got Caitlin and you got Kelsey, right? You got two franchise players. Okay. I mean, they're connected, right? They've connected themselves together. Okay. They got it. And first of all, I'll back up with Caitlin Clark, and I'm going to tell you this, and I'll tell you this time and time again, right? Because I mean, you got to look at it. Stephanie White's not the coach. Caitlin Clark is the coach, right? Let's clear the air because I don't want the Indiana Fever or anybody else wants to say Mike doesn't like Caitlin Clark, right? Because Caitlin Clark is the coach, right? And the person that's coming in, you're only coming in to assist, right? To assist this generational type player, which means they don't even need you as a coach, right? So here comes Stephanie White putting her footprint on it, right? She's putting her footprint on it. But what you're going to do is you're going to break up something that was already getting built, right? And already had been developed, okay? And now you're going to come in and say, okay, this is all the things we're going to do. And I'm only speaking, okay, about Stephanie White and what she's saying, right? I'm not making this up. So we're going to play this 94 feet of ball pressure. We're going to recognize defense. We're going to do all these things, right? But you don't have the players to do all that, right? Because the Indiana Fever are not the Connecticut Sun. They're not even close athletically, and they don't have a player like Bonner, okay? They don't have a player like Carrington can lock up on that type of defense, right? So at the end of the day, what are you trying to do, right? Because you want to change something that's already working, right? It's already working. And this is a situation that can get out of hand, and it can get out of hand in a hurry, right? Because at the end of the day, okay, these two have already formulated their bond. Okay, these are the coaches right here. These are the ones on the floor because coaches cannot take the floor, right? No matter how great you are. Now, this situation that the Indiana has with Stephanie White and everything and how it's all going to work out, that's the big time play for Indiana in the Indiana Midwest market. Chicago doesn't feel that way, right? And a lot of the other WNBA teams, they don't feel that way at all, right? Because if you're going to go over there and say, Coach Quinn of the Seattle Storm, you're going to tell them that Stephanie White's a better coach than the Seattle Storm coach? No, they're not hearing that. You're going to tell anybody Stephanie White's the better coach than Becky Hammond? No, and nobody's listening to that, right? And this is an old replay of a movie. And I'm going to walk you through this because I know the movie and I know about toxic players. And here's the biggest thing I'm going to tell you that's really important as I walk through this. We'll get back to the comments, but you got to know this is toxic players win championships, right? So I was thinking about that, right? So you think about the Warriors, right? Do they got a toxic player? Yes. Yes, they do, right? He's an enforcer. Draymond Green out of Michigan State, right? So he's coming up there, and that guy's going to bounce people around. I mean, he's going to knock you. He's going to do. I mean, you got Grayson Allen, right? Is he toxic? Yeah, he's toxic. You know he's toxic, right? Grayson Allen is toxic you can get, right? But at the end of the day, okay, these kind of players win championships. Dennis Rodman, right? Was he toxic on the Detroit? Yeah, but he was. So let's take it back to Indiana. I'm going to talk to you about a guy named Mark Jackson, right? Because this old movie that you're watching right now, okay, with Stephanie White, I've already seen the movie, right? So here you go. You got Christie sides is like Mark Jackson, right? You come in, you get the team. Here you go. And what does Mark do with the Warriors, right? He goes in there, and Mark, who's from Indiana, okay, coming in there out of New York and goes in there and coaches up the Warriors, right? So he's sitting there and he comes in, and these are all babies he's got, right? And the babies, who am I talking about? I'm talking about Steph Curry, right? You got Klay Thompson, okay? You understand that? You see what I'm saying? You got Draymond Green. You understand? These are all babies when he got them, right? They just drafted him, right? So Mark comes in there, and Mark, it was kind of like Christie sides, right? So, and here's the thing with Christie sides, I'll tell you as I go through this story here, because this is the real deal, right? So Christie sides, you go Stephanie White and Christie, I got a better coach. Let me clue you in on something as I walk through Mark Jackson here because Mark was special, right? So Christie Sides, if you took Stephanie White, sent her to Vanderbilt, okay, you saw the result. If you take Christie Sides and send her to Vanderbilt, she's going to win more games, right? Christie Sides going to win more games at Vanderbilt. You know why? Because Christie Sides, it's not about her. She's a teacher. Okay, I've always said Christie Sides is going to be a better college coach than a pro coach. Why? Because she's going to get that freshman and she's going to nurture that freshman, right? It's going to become a sophomore. And then she's going to get her second group of freshmen and her third. They're going to become juniors and seniors, and they're going to be bought into the program because she's bought into the player. Christie Sides coaches from the heart, right? She coaches from the heart, not from the ego. Now, we go back to Stephanie White. Stephanie White's not coaching from the heart. It's like, I know what I'm doing. I know how to get it done. This is where it's supposed to happen, and it ain't never done it, right? So you got Mark Jackson goes in, right? So it gets kind of bumpy. And the story with the way, let me tell you what really happened with Mark Jackson. Mark Jackson had family, had to go back to the family in L.A. Mark had to fly back and forth. He made that commitment to his wife. The Warriors wanted Mark in the building 24/7. Mark said, I couldn't do that, right? Changes his life, different scenarios, things did happen, but nevertheless, that's why the Warriors made the change, right? So who do they bring in, right? They go in there and they get Steve Kerr, right? You get Steve Kerr, right? And I'm bringing you up this because Lou Olson, right? I used to talk to Lou in the game. One thing, Lou, anytime Lou liked a player and recruiting or anything, he'd always tell you, "Boy, he's a keeper. Boy, he's a keeper." He would just always repeat that. But who does Steve Kerr, right? He comes in, he coaches the Warriors, right? Now, you look at how Steve Kerr came in, and the reason I'm going through this is because the Indiana Fever are trying to duplicate this model, right? But Steve Kerr came in a whole lot different than Stephanie White, right? Because he's already been with Lute Olson, right? So he's already won championships, and he's kind of like moving through the ranks, right? And so how does Steve bounce up the ranks? This is really important, right? So Steve goes over there and he works for Phil Jackson, right? Now, you know what Phil Jackson won? He's won championships. You got Lute Olson, Arizona's won championship. And then he bounces over to Greg Popovich, right? Same thing, young Greg Popovich, young Phil Jackson. But I'm showing you this for the sake of this gentleman here took over for Mark Jackson, right? So he's got 3 coaching pedigrees under his belt. He's got Lute Olson, he's got Phil Jackson, and he's got Greg Popovich, who played a big influence, okay, with Becky Hammond, right? So this guy comes in and he wins 4 NBA championships, going to the finals every year. He never came in with the strong hand as a coach. He put in plays and he put in offenses that he really learned from the pedigree of 3 coaches to be able to get the Warriors to become a champion, right? So at the end of the day, let me ask you this. When you do something like that, does that make Mark Jackson a bad coach? No, it doesn't, right? It was the timing of what happened. And when Kerr came in, he got the Warriors to where not they were focusing on defense, they were focusing on playing as a team and how the team synergy, and he put them in offensive sets. That's why I didn't understand. Okay, when you get back there and you start talking about Christie Sides, I didn't understand why you're going to play and praise. Okay, this is what got me. Christie Sides praised Stephanie White so much, lost her job, right? And she took their job. Now you look like an idiot, right? Because you wanted to be so much like them that you convinced Indiana that she should have your job, right? That's what I didn't understand about Christie Sides, right? But at the end of the day, you got to ask yourself now, okay, you go back and you're saying, how is she going to do this? This one here is surprising to me because she normally coaches get hired and they don't give out strategy, right? Okay, we're going to do all these things. You got to have players to do all that. And the first thing, you don't have an Alyssa Thomas, you don't have a Bonner, and you don't have a Carrington, right? So let's not kid ourselves when somebody says they're going to do it. Now, you may be putting pressure on Kelly to get the players, but God, Lord, just help me out, right? Because at the end of the day, you're not the only team that's getting better in the WNBA. Everybody else is getting better as well, right? So you got to look at that and just say, where are we going? I want to walk you through that because this is where the Indiana Fever are. This is not a movie, okay, that Money Mike hasn't seen before. I'm a big time Caitlin Clark fan, and I'm just waiting to see how long before Stephanie White and Caitlin Clark, they're going to have their disagreement or disengaged moment, right? Because at the end of the day, you can't put 2 elephants in the room, and you cannot have power against power, okay? And that's the thing. You got to be where you can actually put something in there that the players can lean on when he goes through tough times and you walk him through the process. Okay, Kelsey didn't get many screens. That's why she didn't get blitzed. That only happens when you don't go one on one. Okay, yeah. I mean, you gotta look at Kelsey Mitchell as a combo guard, right? Because see, here's what happens when you're a point guard and a combo guard. There's a difference, right? When the point guard, the first thing you want to do, you're trying to initiate offense, right? You're trying to get it going, right? And so once you do that, then everything kind of works itself into read and react basketball. But when you get in there with Mitchell, now she's at a combo guard. Well, that's a scorer, right? So a two guard's a scorer, a shooter, right? They're going to be one or the other. But the fact that Mitchell's a scorer, which means she could create her own shot, go down there, make tough shots. And some of the shots that Mitchell was able to take last year, really a lot of them are ill-advised shots, right? But she started making them, so who's going to stop it, right? And that's the thing what you got now. But at the end of the day, I mean, without Kelsey, let's put it to you like this: without Kelsey Mitchell on the Indiana Fever, Caitlin Clark doesn't succeed, right? She doesn't succeed because a lot of those assists were to Kelsey Mitchell, right? And then with Kelsey Mitchell, without Caitlin Clark, really, they don't. She doesn't succeed. So one without the other, they're not very good. But it just depends on how that's going to go. And you know what? Like you said, Kelsey didn't get blitzed. CC had the ball. Most all she had to do was pop up 3-point line or cherry pick, run out, slip. Kelsey had plenty of screens set up for it. Well, that's what you're supposed to do for a two guard, right? That's the way it's supposed to work. CC is a real point guard. Nobody in the WA passes as good as CC. Well, I won't necessarily say nobody because I really like Courtney Williams, if you ask me. I mean, you want to tell me who the best point guard, not the best player, not the best basketball player or anything like that. You want to know who the best point guard to me? It's Courtney Williams, right? Because nobody sets him up as good as Courtney Williams. Plus, she's got a 10-15. She's got the elbow jumper. I mean, she does a lot on the court. A lot of intangibles people don't see. And Courtney Williams was another player like Gabby Williams, who everybody thinks can't play the point guard. But guess what? I mean, you got to give Coach Reeve credit for giving her opportunity to do it. But the thing with Coach Reeve, I might not like a lot of things she says publicly, but really she understands how to give a player a game plan. They understand it, they can execute it, and that's how she made it as deep as she could. But CC passes now. You want to get into passing. Okay, that's the difference. Because if you could easily say, okay, that Caitlin Clark's the best passing guard in the WNBA, right? She's the best passing guard. That's a hand down the fact. Nobody can thread the needle like Caitlin. But that doesn't make Caitlin the best point guard, right? That's a difference. You're talking about apple and an orange or an apple and a slice of an apple, however you want to look at it. So there's good talent everywhere. Seems obvious to me that Indiana should core Kelsey and pay her the 1 year super max. It's only 30K more. Regular max. Now is not the time to be cheap. Yeah, well, see, here's where Indiana kind of blew that ticket. All right, because you got to put the hope and faith. It's great to say you love Kelsey Mitchell now, but why is Kelsey Mitchell an unrestricted free agent, right? So you got to ask yourself, why is Kelsey Mitchell an unrestricted free agent? I'll tell you why, because Indiana Fever had no idea, didn't want to keep her, right? But now you go play, and all of a sudden you see a player do things you haven't seen. A player becomes an all-star, and this player has been the same for 8 years. Here's what happens when you get in losing organizations and you don't win, you don't recognize the talent you have, right? So you got Kelsey Mitchell doing things that you're telling her to do, right? So whoever was coaching for those 8 years, let me unwind the clock here, right? Let me unwind the clock on you. Whoever were coaching for those time when they drafted Kelsey Mitchell, they put a governor on Kelsey Mitchell, right? They put a governor on her, right? They didn't allow her to play this way, right? So you got to look back because Indiana Fever, you're going deeper than me. I'm what you call a baby fan, right? But you got some people who been watching Indiana Fever for years. So I want to know who was coaching then and why wasn't she producing like she's producing now? Because I'll tell you what, Christie sides green lighted. She green right. Go ahead and do whatever you want to do. Go ahead and just do you, right? Because eventually you got to let a player do you. And when a player does themselves and they know they got confidence and they got your backing, because Caitlin opened that door. The Indiana Fever never opened that door like that up to players and say, hey, I got a point guard. You go out there, Kelsey Mitchell. We want Kelsey Mitchell to shoot the ball 20 times a game. Okay, is that what you're telling me? Because I wasn't here, but if you're telling me you were saying, hey, Kelsey Mitchell, shoot the ball 20 times a game for the first 7 years of her career, we got to be honest on now. LMFAO, Indiana was the worst team in the league with Kelsey Mitchell. Well, you know what? Who coached her? Who coached her? That's what I want to know. For years, the CC came, right? Let her walk and get real player who plays team ball. Well, that's a fact. Your takes are getting worse by the episode, right? And that where I always agree, and I gotta respect. Okay, tinfoil Jones' opinion. I gotta respect it, right? Because at the end of the day, if you have a passion for the Indiana Fever, and I say there's a difference between racism and radicalness, right? Radical fans tend to say things that they may not want to say, but it's an emotional reaction, right? So here's the deal. Let her walk. Well, you got to get somebody else. All right. You got to get somebody to feel exactly what she did. And I'll tell you what, there's not a lot of combo guards walking around, okay, in the WNBA that can come here and get you 20 points a night, right? So, and if you do get them, okay, you're competing against somebody else to get them. And this is where the new contract and the CBA and everything, because this whole thing about giving these ladies cheap money, that needs to end tomorrow. You need to go ahead and pay. That's why Mitchell can't sign a contract. Because what if they go up to $2 million a year? What if, let's say, if you got 7 years in the league, put you in an escalator, right? You got a max. You've been all WN first team. You've been all star, right? You've been all star, so that qualifies you. So you should be able to get the extra money. But how much really is the extra money, right? Okay, facts. I don't know what Mike's talking about, man. You Frederick Robinson, come on, man. How you gonna give me a hard time when I'm just speaking the truth, right? You come in here, you got two elite franchise point guards. When I say two elite, that means they can both be starters on any other team in the WNBA. Because everybody told me Anescu was great, but I saw Anescu go 1 for 19. That takes you off the books with me, right? I'm not gonna let you go out there and go 1 for 19, and then you're gonna come back in here and tell me you're great. No, but you guys got to give me a chance, man. I mean, we gotta look at this. Okay, here we go. Abiz Scotland, thanks for the upload. I would think Kelsey has to consider what team in 225 would give her a chance at a championship and not be a combo guard. That's the truth. Because of the 2026 media deal, I understand every free agent will only be signing 1 year contracts for 225, right? So that a bit of Scotland that starts it off, right? Because the WNBA players shouldn't even want to sign a 1 year. We might as well skip this whole deal about playing okay for a 1 year contract, and why don't we just hold out until we get the deal signed, right? Then we'll advance it so the players can get escalated salaries. It's not a big gamble to stay with the Fever for 225. No, it's not really. Hope to put it in another personal best season. Yeah, consider the options again for the start of 226. Kelsey has learned the CC system. Yeah, that's true. So if we were to move into 225, it might take the 225 season to adjust to a new team. It's going to have to be some adjustments because, you're talking about Kelly. You're talking about the fans don't like players on the Indiana Fever, right? And it's okay. I mean, they got a right. One thing I can tell you, even the Money Mike show, right? It's still right here. This for the fans. So you got a right to tell me what you want. And it's up to me to listen. And I'm going to listen, right? And with Stephanie White, I'll tell you, like you guys, everybody tells me, they always tell me, slow down, Mike, slow down. Stephanie White, slow down, right? Because if you slow down, you'll be able to take a deep breath and understand what you're saying. With another team, Kelsey's value for 226 may be reduced in comparison playing with the Fever. Sorry to take it back to what about CC? But if the 4.4 million figure is true, you got to go overseas. It's put the so-called Messi style offer on around a 1 million. It's $5 million deal, guys. I already told you about that. I mean, come out with a $1 million. Are you serious? I mean, at the end of the day, first of all, I don't have the time to do it. And if you're gonna do it, then why don't you just have me show up for the All-Star game, right? Because that's how the top 100 camps in the country and everybody. You get the big time, the top 5 players. They don't come play in the camp. They'll show up for the All-Star game, right? I heard Kelsey was getting at least 1 million from China. Yeah, they're paying him. Well, it's a different deal because it's a country paying you, right? But it also works both ways. If you get a player from over there like Yao Ming, okay, when Yao Ming came over here, that I think the Chinese government had to get like 75% of his salary. I mean, it's a huge amount, okay, but they don't do it like over here, but they work off a commodity. So when you go to Russia, it's oil. All right. So I'm surprised every player going overseas doesn't disclose what they're getting paid. Shame the WNBA. Well, they can't really shame the WNBA because the NBA is a global, under a global architecture and a global blueprint. So the same teams, okay, that all these players are playing for, They have some association with the national team or are going to have an association with the NBA. And it all starts. I mean, years ago, I used to go out and watch the Nike Global Challenge, right? Nike Global Challenge up in Portland. So what they got? They got the top U.S. players, okay, that are playing. They bring all everybody from overseas, right? So there's a lot of international players can play in the WNBA. And an example of that is Sudan, right? You got Lou Dang. It's a grassroots program going over there. And look at Sudan. They're playing basketball, right? So at the end of the day, it seems every player for themselves. That's the WNBA. When players go overseas, so should the CBA be scrapped and every player for themselves be introduced in the WNBA? It is every player for themselves in the WNBA, and here's why. All right. Because one, you don't make any money, right? So you're getting paid a job. I mean, all the players have college degrees, right? Because at the end of the day, to play college ball, and you got to be there 4 years. If the NCAA teams don't graduate, I think somebody made 92, 93, 94% of his athletes, you lose scholarships, right? So you're going to graduate. But at the end of the day, I mean, you got a players association, but I mean, they've lost every battle and you can't really negotiate with yourself, right? Because if you got your investors are 60% deep, so any offer you make, okay, and this one was kind of cuckoo cocoa puffs to me. So the WNBA gets 2.2 million, right? But at the end of the day, 60% of that has to go to your partners, which are the same people who gave you the money. So you're negotiating with yourself. And Wall Street really, you get on CNN, they were like, well, the WNBA didn't choose the right partners, right? Because if they'd choose partners who are not associated, okay, or were not in a conflict of interest, then they could have went ahead and negotiated a good deal, right? But now you can't do that, now, and that's where their hands are tied and everything's capped, right? Because there's local media stations that want to, they want to broadcast the WNBA. Now, what do local media stations do? They give revenue to the local team, right? But you can't do that, right? Because you can only watch the games on ABC, ESPN, or Amazon, right? So that's where the cap is. So when it comes to getting the money and controlling the money, the players don't have any control of the money, but now they do because 50% of that comes to them. These salaries are going to skyrocket. There's nothing you can do. I mean, this is a joke, right? But Stephanie White said these are the next two Stockton and Malone. All right. A man among games, right? He's always going to tell me something good, right? Because it's all faith, so I'm with you. No one compared anyone to Sky to Stockton and Malone, right? White said they'd be the best tandem in history. No other coach has said that in the WNBA. I give White the edge on this issue because she knows what people are in the athletic. I think it's not a factor of what size did and what White will do. Measures of central tendency are comparable unless you do a Z-score analysis out of a T statistic. Yeah, Sides is a good coach who only had 2 years of experience as a head coach. That's right. White has been a head coach at all levels and experience with failure and success. Yeah, one thing about being successful, you got to fail. So right, you got it. You're nailing it. Failure is the key. True wisdom comes from failure and not success. Points on the board are not a measure of skill and of talent. Yep. You got it right. So, and I think he's got quite a bit more to say. I mean, now you nailed it on that. But the deal is true, right? Because he said a lot of good things. I mean, I'll take a show and do that one because that was a great comment. I read it. And here's the deal, folks. You got to know this. Is when you get to these points of skill, wisdom, coaching, it's not always going to work out where you think it's going to work out. I think that's the biggest thing I can say with Stephanie White is I don't know. I just don't know. Keep moving. Stephanie White is not Phil Jackson. LOL ain't gonna make them fever team past the first round. Yeah, you know what? That's a growing pain. That's gonna be. It's only two sides of the coin with Stephanie White. It's either success or failure, right? But you go in there, you have the confidence. And I'll tell you when I know they start losing it, when they say we got to work on things. Oh, we got to go to practice. We got to work on. You can't do that now. You can't do that. The only concern I have is you don't have the Connecticut Sun talent. The teams are really they're getting better, right? And as a Fever fan, I leave who to recruit to the team to Amber Cox, right? I think in the case he was using long-term radical mean, right? I got as a Fever fan, I use CC. All right, so I got a little off balance. Let me get back caught up here. All right, AB, what's going on, man? You're back again. All right, thanks for the update. I don't only watch too many videos about other teams in the WNBA. It's good to hear many might take on what's happening outside the Fever, especially in Chicago local rival, right? Yeah, you got something brewing over there in Chicago. You got something brewing over there in Indiana, right? And it's going to be, they're in the same division, so can't but one of them come out. And you got some championships. You got Stephanie White. And here's the deal, right? Because you got the Indiana Fever have selected Stephanie White, right? And that's an Indiana favorite. All right, that's an Indiana favorite. That's not the favorite of the WNBA, right? So you're not. It's not like Stephanie White's. There's 7 other jobs. There's 6 other jobs. I think 5 or 6 other jobs that are open in the WNBA. So there's going to be a different brand of coaches coming in. Now it's not. See, I think everybody measured Stephanie White against coaches that were existing in the WNBA. That's what they measured Stephanie White on. Okay, we got a good coach compared to the other coaches in the WNBA. But now you got 5, 6 of those coaches gone, and who else coming back in? Because if they're going to hire recycle, I think they're getting out of the recycling business. Myself, I really do. Interesting information. Yep, we're going to keep it as interesting can. I'm a big CC fan, but I totally agree. We can build a team around Kelsey Mitchell. There's no doubt about it. Mitchell's special, right? But Mitchell's also got to be willing to continue to do what Mitchell does, and I don't know if that's going to happen, right? Yeah, I mean, you got to really ask yourself that. I think it would be a big ask to connect S to change their style. Yeah, yeah. Bonner would have known she been in Game Garden CC. Yep, yep. Bonner took that away. Even if Fever took around 26 games to reap rewards, yep. If it was just coached without a player like CC, that's the deal that people got to understand. You don't really coach Caitlin Clark, right? You don't really coach Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark coaches herself. She is so intelligent, and the only thing you could do is get in the way and mess that up, right? So when Mark Jackson took the Warriors, he had put that in him. Okay. So when Steve Kerr came in, he didn't have to do that. He took them like Stephanie White. He added something to the top, right? But that was a core team of draft picks, which you have here. This is Indiana Fever, core team of draft picks. So even the Fever, 26 games, that's a long time. That's a long time. But you got to say it. No way Smith and the Shields are both out of their mind. Yeah, I mean, you could look at things a lot different. Only thing I can tell you folks is this thing doesn't always work its way out the way people are going to think they will. Why you keep leaving Kelsey Mitchell out of the lineup? Do you not watch the Fever play? Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, Kelsey Mitchell is a big time player. I mean, he's a big time player. So, I mean, that's where I'm going with that, folks. But you know what? When you walk back through it, and I take you back, and I just go into Stephanie White, right? 'Cause Stephanie White, right? And you know what? I mean, you're talking about a person who's got an ego, right? You got somewhat of an ego, and the ego is what got them to where they are, right? So you got to deal with that ego, and you got to really look at it because she's being really vocal out there, right? So she wants to say, "I could do this," right? And she's confident, right? So Cathy's confident, but you got something sacred here. And I don't know if you should mess this sacredness up and trying to change it or radically change it versus build on what they've already done. Okay, the Fever are not a defensive magnet. They don't have the foot speed for that, right? So you play a certain way. The Fever scored over 100 points with Caitlin Clark, right? And Mitchell. So you got to look at it a couple times. They're looking at them like the Splash Sisters, right? So you want to be cautious how you approach when you get a horse like Secretariat or the Ferrari like Caitlin Clark, because all these changes, which means now you have a team that bonded, played together, and now you're saying, I'm going to make all this great. I mean, skip all the fact, okay, I get it. She didn't mention, okay, her name in a press conference, okay? I brought that up to just say, you know what? You got to address this thing right. And you don't get to make mistakes, right? Because you don't get to come out of broadcasting and all of a sudden take the job and you don't know what you're doing in the press conference. You're the one that normally does the interview, okay? And you have to ask yourself, are you going to ask yourself some of the same tough questions, right? Because coaching Caitlin Clark, okay, is not easy. Coaching Mitchell is real easy. Mitchell's not as vocal. Caitlin is an animation, okay, of greatness, right? And it's hard to coach greatness. So when I got into that with you before, and I talked to you about people like Mark Jackson, right? So that's Christie sides. No doubt about it. Christie sides, Mark. But Mark is a better coach than Christie sides by far. Mark can coach in the NBA. Ain't no doubt about it. Right? Mark Jackson be a great candidate for the WNBA. I don't know if you get Mark to take the job, right? Because Mark's a listener, right? He's one of those guys that he's not going to be vocal first. He's going to listen to everything you have to say, right? But that doesn't make him less of a coach because Steve Kerr came behind him, right? But I got to respect Steve Kerr pedigree, right? So you come from Luke Oates, I'll tell you, I'll never forget. He always loved those favorite word, boy, he's a keeper, right? That's what you'd hear him say. And you look at that, you go to it, and you say, well, geez, how did this guy fall in, right? You look at Steve Kerr, well, how did he fall into these two guys, right? Well, it was a matter of luck, and by the time he got through Luke Oates, Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, by the time he went back to broadcasting, going in there, being in administration, right? You got to look at it. This is like Kelly, right? Because at the end of the day, if you had to push come to shove, I mean, Kelly could walk down and coach the Indiana Fever, right? I mean, let's be honest, right? But you give a little buffer because you're in administration now. But Steve Kerr did it all. Broadcast was in there as a general manager, president. I mean, he was doing everything he can with the Suns. I mean, he went through that. And by the time he got to coaching, okay, and coaching a WNBA championship, which is what Stephanie White is trying to do, but he did it in the NBA, right? He was a player. He played the same position that every coach darn near in the NBA or the WNBA is, the point guard position, right? So that's the most critical position. And the point guard is already the coach, right? So when you get in there, you're going to tell me about Caitlin Clark. Well, Caitlin Clark's already the coach. So the Indiana Fever need a coach? No, they need a facilitator. Now, the facilitator's got to be a CEO that's able to have good lines of communication and don't disconnect the phone. Don't disconnect the team because now you got to bring other players in, and the Indiana Fever is very selective. You've already said you're going to deal with the coacher, right? So you got Kelly saying we got a coacher. So you got players that don't fit the coacher, and that's what you got to figure out. But it's just basketball to me. And you know what? I wouldn't mess up Caitlin Clark at all. You got to understand something. In the NBA, the game is the game. In the WNBA, the game is still the game. You got two elite point guards rocking and rolling downtown Indiana, right? And you got Boston's ready to roll. The team is built. You got Lexi Hole. You got everything you need. The only thing you don't want to see is somebody come and mess it up. Because at the end of the day, we only can go off of what you've done. You are who you are, and you're going to do what you're going to do. And you got to earn this with Stephanie White. Stephanie White has got her mind made up on what she wants to do. The only thing we don't know is whether or not it's going to work itself out. You stay tuned. Keep it coming. This is the Money Mike Syndicated Radio Podcast. And we're going to keep bringing it the way we got to bring it. But the WNBA is fantastic. And ain't nobody going to change me on that.